Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash. Double honors, the elders and apostles, a great millstone, where I teach the truth with sincerity. And a shout out to Yakims out there in the four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, while there's been pretty big news about, of course, the chemical weapons attack, because that's what the U.S. has done with Ohio. Yeah, that's a chemical weapons attack, by the way, you know, weapons of mass destruction. But, you know, Biden doesn't seem to want to talk about that when he's giving a press conference, right? So that's what's going on there. But you also got them planning the next pandemic, as this redacted goes into.
Let's talk about this latest World Health Organization gearing up for its next pandemic.
So there it is.
It already has basically its next virus all ready to go.
Yeah.
We were wondering,
the Sears virus, or Marburg,
that this is about to happen. They've been telling us, like, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when this is going to happen. And by the way, they were gaming out COVID months ahead of time. Right, we were learning about their sort of game theory and everything that they were rolling out and testing months ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Fauci even told us, of course, that it's going to happen under Trump's calendar.
Yeah.
And it absolutely did. So here's the next one that they're already gaming out in Africa.
Okay, so it is called Marburg.
There it is, Marburg.
The World Health Organization already has a vaccine team in place. In fact, we know when they started if we read their documents, which we did today, and we're going to show it to you. So yesterday, on Tuesday, Valentine's Day, the World Health Organization convened an emergency meeting to discuss an outbreak of Marburg virus in Central Africa. Marburg, essentially, I just want to make this clear, is a town in Germany where the virus was first discovered in 1967. It is presumably not there now, but maybe we'll see this called out as a racist virus name because it's linked to a place that has happened before.
They're going to change the name because it's not as sexy. It needs to be able to, like monkeypox. It needs to be something that we put on television.
Remember
and they try to scare us all into going and getting a vaccine for.
Right. Well, they wanted us to stop associating COVID with China. Because they thought that was
virus.
A racist thing to do. So Marburg is associated with Germany where there is not an outbreak. So I'm just predicting right now that could cause a problem because we've been through it.
I'm gonna guess gorilla flu. Just because it affects mostly primates.
It does, in fact. Yes.
Although we're on kind of a tear with picking on Germany lately. We just blew up their pipeline. So, we just blew up the pipeline to, bringing natural gas to Germany.
Right.
And throwing that country into chaos. So we can why don't we call it the Heidelberg virus?
Yes. In fact, Marburg is associated with monkeys and gorillas and bats as well.
Yeah.
So
similar to monkey butt.
Species. Bats are not a primate.
No, not that I know of.
Right, Philip?
They're a mammal.
They're definitely not.
mammal.
But either way, this is what Esau's planning.
Monkey family.
Unless it's like one of those, like a duck-billed platypus is not a duck. It's like, is that a trick question? No. Okay. So we all learned that together. Bats are not a primate. Okay. So the World Health Organization says that at least 9 people have died from the virus that is now spreading through Equatorial Guinea with a confirmed 16 cases. Now they're saying that based on past outbreaks, they have a fatality rate of 88%. But this one, I can do the math also, 9 out of 16 cases, it's 56% fatality rate. Not great.
No, Virginia says in our chat, says it's very, very dangerous. Very, very nasty.
Yes.
Virginia Vikings, it's very, very nasty, this Marburg thing.
Yeah, it's a hemorrhagic fever, so it's pretty nasty. I've seen estimates as high as 90% fatality rate.
Wow, and that's a point too with COVID, right? With COVID, it wasn't as nasty, right? It was not as bad as they wanted it to be.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Like we sat down and watched that movie.
This COVID wasn't even real.
Lockdowns, and we're like, oh well, if the pandemic looked like this, where everyone was throwing up, we might
throwing up blood.
Yeah, we might feel a little.
Oh yeah, like
now we got it.
But yeah, so that's what we got. So absolutely, we should not be downplaying this. Like, oh, they're going to make us think that this is scary. This is scary enough on its own. So we're just going to talk about what the World Health Organization is doing, and not act like they are faking us out, right? Because it's scary. We don't want anybody to get it. We also don't want anybody to exploit it.
Gwynny, so release it?
The
Absolutely.
World Health Organization says that they convened an urgent meeting of the Marburg Virus Vaccine Consortium, which is called MARVAC, to discuss the outbreak. This is their update on Tuesday's meeting. Well, what's MARVAC? What is that, and when did it become a thing? Turns out it became a thing in October. Here is the paper. I'm just going to show you the title page. An introduction to MARVAC, to the Marburg Virus Vaccine Consortium. It is dated, if you zoom in there, October 13th, 2022. So relatively new, this MARVAC vaccine program for Marburg virus.
It's so convenient how they managed to get these things just a few months ahead of time, isn't it?
Right, and so who is involved in MARVAC? Well, let's zoom in there on the title page, next one. Okay, Institute for Virology from the National Institute of Health, Fauci-related, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, U.S. COVID response at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, all other kinds of, health departments and colleges and other states, science labs. Also, Boston University School of Medicine, where they did gain-of-function research on COVID, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So a lot of the same players that were controlling the COVID pandemic already are involved in MARVAC. So
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm surprised at the bottom it doesn't say, oh, and Bill Gates.
Right.
Well, they don't have to, because, as we know, and we've talked about on this show, the World Health Organization is mostly funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So at the heart of the World Health Organization is Bill Gates. He has his hands in all of this. And each of those institutions we just talked about are also funded. Boston University, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Each of these are funded by him.
So there you have it. That's what the next plan is. And there's more, because we got another breaking fire, and this one's in Florida, I believe. This one's a nursery plant set on fire. Yeah, things are accelerating, as this is the hopeful year. All prophecy come to pass. No accidents. The obvious masses have no idea they are being systematically exterminated by a series of planned disasters. Well, yeah, it's quite obvious. Mass extermination of humanity is underway, and most humans are blind to what's happening. Yeah, because they don't want to believe that their government would deliberately. But here it is. The chemical weapons gas bomb that was ignited by government authorities in Ohio was, of course, both an act of deliberate terrorism and a crime against humanity. Again, it's a chemical weapons attack is what it is. And the environment. I spoke with an accelerated hazardous materials emergency response expert who told me that these chemicals should never have been set on fire by authorities. The burning of vinyl chloride, of course, releases phosphate, a World War I chemical weapon that was maims or kills biological beings on contact. The train provided the perfect cover story for genocidal government ages to essentially detonate a chemical weapons bomb. So you see, the train was made to look like it was an accident. They are deliberately poisoning people. So there we go. The EPA says that this is safe to breathe. Do you think it is? But this is a dangerous toxic pollutant that we must eliminate at all costs. There are no accidents when it comes to global genocide. All these things are being done with a purpose, with a determined goal of global genocide and depopulation. So here we go. They're talking about
it's really bad. It's worse possibly than we even know. And mainstream media is hardly covering it. So, of course, we're having to get information from people on the ground. And thank God that we actually have social media somewhat free at this point to where people can get this information out. But, I mean, it looks like as soon as this train went over, it was sort of which worst case scenario are you going with? So what happened was this train falls over, and then they say it's about to explode, and they say the explosion will be a mile in diameter. I mean, it'll be essentially a tactical nuclear weapon with the added chemicals on top of that. So in desperation, they poke holes in the side, drain all of the vinyl chloride, which is hugely carcinogenic with like unique liver cancers that it causes and all sorts of other stuff, into a big trench on the side of the railroad. And they decided to blow it up. So we covered this for 2 hours on American Journal. And we actually, for the second hour, opened up the phone calls to experts to talk about this. And we had somebody in environmental remediation call in who actually said this was probably the right thing to do, because vinyl chloride, what happens is when it's in the air, it's like rubbing alcohol. It evaporates really quickly. But when it's in the ground, it seeps into the ground and it off-gases for years or maybe decades after that. So if you let it get into the soil, I mean, that's it. It's over. It's carcinogenic and it's there forever. So they wanted to explode it, but of course then it's a giant cloud that goes over several states.
And so they lie and say it's not bad for you.
Well, now they're saying that it's not in the water, it's safe to come back, and then you've got people posting on TikTok, like, I just walked into my house and everything smells like chlorine, and,
There's animals dying everywhere.
Our animals are dying everywhere. So, yeah.
The point is they're lying instead of being honest.
Well, absolutely, they're lying, and they're covering it up, and they're completely ignoring what seems to have caused this, which is the Biden administration's quiet war with the train unions, where essentially trains are hardly staffed to an appropriate measure. They're skipping safety measures.
And that's why we've seen some of the strikes.
Well, this is all as a consequence of the strikes. We actually had a train conductor, train engineer call in yesterday and totally confirmed that and said it's almost impossible to get capable people on staff anymore. And this was just a disaster waiting to happen, essentially.
Yep, and like everything else, though, this is all done deliberately. And you got this. Biden ignores East Palestine disaster during press conference as EPA finally arrives 2 weeks after. So, pretty much so. Biden doesn't even have the guts to even face the public about it. Showing you that he's not, he could never have been elected by the people. Okay, I don't think there's a video for that one. Iran says U.S. created Al-Qaeda. Daesh rejects absurd claim because, of course, recently Babylon tried to say that Iran created Al-Qaeda. Yeah, who's trying to change the political sphere of the Middle East? I mean, who really wants others to step down? Does Iran ask other leaders to step down? Or is that the Israeli state along with Babylon? Foreign minister has categorically dismissed claims by the U.S. administration about the presence of a leader of the Al-Qaeda terrorist group in Iran, saying linking the terrorist outfit to Iran is absurd, as those who created Al-Qaeda and Daesh are to blame for the spread of terrorism across the world. He's absolutely right about it. But, this is what Amalek does. They want to blame Islamophobia, as it's called, which pretty much... they just blame Iran for everything, right? So, hey, even more, we know that U.S. is a sponsor of all terrorism.
Supporting terrorist criminals is part and parcel of the U.S.'s foreign policy. That's according to Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, who blames Washington for backing anti-Iran terrorist group Mujahideen al-Khalq organization MKO. Nasser Kanani says the U.S. has been supportive of members of SAVAK, a notorious intelligence agency during the Pahlavi regime in Iran. Kanani called on the U.S. to stop backing criminals and terrorists. He also urged Washington not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs. On Saturday, an anti-Iran rally was held in Los Angeles. A photo showed the former deputy chief of SAVAK taking part in the gathering. He was involved in torturing thousands of political prisoners and ordinary citizens over the years before the Pahlavi regime was toppled. Meanwhile, U.S. Congress has recently pushed for a resolution in favor of the MKO. The infamous terrorist group has killed thousands of Iranian people, including statesmen, in the early years following the victory of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Let's bring in Mohsen Naqvi, a human rights activist, to see what he thinks. Mohsen Naqvi, when you take a look at the U.S. support for terrorists, in this particular case, we're looking at two, one an organization and one, it used to be an organization by the name of SAVAK, of which it had one of its, people just show up, not just show up, but it came to this rally of which there's support there that's obvious of this man who has blood on his hands. He was responsible for torturing many Iranians during the Pahlavi regime, and that included the torture, rape of women. How would you explain the way that the U.S. and its relationship with either the MKO or Savak's member like this particular character, and of course how that really is a stain on their hands in terms of the way they've approached the issue?
Yes, it is quite sad that the United States of America, who claim to be the advocates of human rights throughout the world, are now basically supporting, have not since now, but since the very beginning, since after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, have been supporting all elements throughout the world who stand against the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And one of the main components of support that the Western regime, the US empire, the British colonies, and Saddam Hussein's Iraq had were the Mujahideen Khalq. And it is a fact that the MKO supported Saddam Hussein against the Islamic Revolution, where they worked as translators for Saddam Hussein and also as spies during the Fine Muqaddasa, which is the 8-year Iraq war. This supported them as well. Now, as far as Savak is concerned, this narrative that the U.S. empire, that the West has created, that all groups who were against the Islamic Revolution were either disappeared or they were killed by the Islamic Revolution. It's absolutely not true. There were many who are still alive to this date, and the example of the ex-Savak officer that you gave, who was present in an anti-Islamic Iran protest, it proves on to state that this narrative is absolutely incorrect. There are not just this individual from Savak, but there are many other war criminals that the United States gives asylum to. End of the day, it's not about human rights. It's basically a matter of who supports their narrative at a certain given time. The Mahsa Amini protests are an absolute, it's absolutely despicable the way they've used the death of an innocent woman to propagate their narrative throughout the world. Not just in Los Angeles, California, but even in Houston, for instance. These so-called activists and so-called protesters of Mujahideen Khalq, which is a banned terrorist outfit, it's a designated terrorist outfit in Iran. They stand outside mosques, they bully people, they threaten to hurt them, to kill them, and the police, the local police even over here, for some reason, they don't seem to take any action against them. In Houston, for instance, there's an Islamic school in Houston, and every Friday, before Friday prayers, these guys come, they spray paint the walls, and yet no one's been arrested yet. They're spreading violence, they're spreading hate, and it's against the Constitution, the way they act. Yet it is quite obvious that they have some form of support from the U.S. establishment here in the U.S.
Thank you very much for that. Mohsen Naqvi, human rights activist there.
AKA the least of the flock is why everything's so anti-Iran in Babylon, because you know that those Amalekites, well, they controlled Babylon way before they got the Israeli state. They've only had the Israeli state since 1948. But hey, a lot of places are going cashless and people-less, like this McDonald's that just showed up.
McDonald's has started testing the world's first robot restaurant in Texas, igniting both controversy and intrigue. The restaurant in Fort Worth, Texas is entirely automated. Thus, placing an order and picking up your food doesn't even need to involve a person. After Foodie Monster, a user on TikTok and Instagram, published a video from inside, Introverts' Dreams went popular online. The video, which has received 1.2 million views, demonstrates how people may order quick food via computerized screens and pick it up from a machine. According to McDonald's, the order ahead lane, where customers can get their orders on a conveyor belt, is one of the new features. The establishment is the newest step in McDonald's growth plan, Accelerating the Arches, which focuses on innovation to enhance customer experiences. The decision is sensible for a number of reasons. In addition to being quicker and reducing the possibility of human error, it also enables post-pandemic food pickup to be done securely. goal of the restaurant trial, according to Max Carmona, a senior director of global design and restaurant development at McDonald's, is about finding new ways to serve them faster and easier than before. When you step inside the test restaurant concept, you'll notice it's considerably smaller than a traditional McDonald's restaurant in the US. Why? The features inside and outside are geared toward customers who are planning to dine at home or on the go, McDonald's stated. Inside the restaurant, there is a delivery pickup room for couriers to retrieve orders quickly and conveniently. There are also kiosks where customers can place their orders to go and a pickup shelf for orders. Outside the restaurant, there are several parking spaces dedicated to curbside order pickup, as well as designated parking spaces for delivery drivers. The new technology's ethical implications have been expressed by both their disagreements and approvals online. This will put so many people out of work, said one commenter. I'm not for it. On the other end of the spectrum, one Twitter user said, I have a feeling the burgers and service will be way better, while another said, the future is here, after getting a glimpse of the newly opened McDonald's. Keith Vanacek, the branch's franchise operator, seems to be excited about the concept. See how you're not going to be able to buy or sell, save he that has the technology in this restaurant not only allows us to serve our customers in new, innovative ways, it gives our restaurant team the ability to concentrate more on order speed and accuracy, which makes the experience more enjoyable for everyone. I am immensely proud to have this new restaurant concept serving our customers in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. While the novel idea is currently only available at this single location where it is being tested, the McDonald's team claims that their test and learn philosophy for the restaurant means they want to eventually benefit restaurant teams and customers all over the world. Though McDonald's has not specified the length of time the trial restaurant would be open, it is obvious that the success or failure of this idea could influence future plans for further human-free fast food business.
So there you have it, though, and eventually they're all going to be cashless. Yeah, we're moving towards a central bank digital currency where you're not going to be able to buy or sell. Russia conducts a new wave of missile strikes across Ukraine. So yeah, Russia is retaliating against Ukraine. A barrage of missiles by Russian forces have struck targets across Ukraine, according to Ukrainian officials, as the West pledges to pour more arms into the country. In a statement on Thursday, Ukraine's military chief said that in a 2-hour overnight burst, Russian troops had fired a total of 36 missiles of various types, including cruise projectiles. He said Ukraine air defense batteries had managed to shoot down 16 of the Russian missiles. That stated number showed a lower rate of success than against some previous Russian waves. So, like everything else, though, this is continuing to escalate. And like everything else, though, you got this distraction of the U.S. shooting down UFOs, and they are trying to go with a fake alien invasion, you know, just to throw everybody off. It's a curveball.
Well, let's talk about these balloons. Let's talk about these UFOs, because the White House has been making statements. The Senate has been making statements. The White House official now has admitted that the Chinese spy balloon probably wasn't actually a Chinese spy balloon at all. Or
the messaging from
but Ukraine just shot down a bunch of Russian spy balloons too.
National Security spokesperson John Kirby has been saying all kinds of mumbo jumbo. He's saying, let's not really use the word balloon, but he continues to call it a balloon. We don't think it's Chinese, but the Chinese do this, and it's us who figured out that they do this, but that's not a thing. We don't have to worry about UFOs. It's a lot of... Who the heck knows? We're going to show you why it's so confusing. See what you can make of this.
Confusion,
it's really crazy.
Babylon,
one of the main
right?
things that he said just yesterday was, we haven't seen any indication or anything that points specifically to the idea that these 3 objects were part of the People's Republic of China's spying program, or that they were definitively involved in external intelligence collections efforts. That's a not. We're not.
So it's not. Okay.
But he did say Chinese spy balloons exist. They have found them. Not the Trump administration. It wasn't these existed. Wasn't them. We found it. High five. So, you know, basically he's saying this was not unfounded, but maybe it was a slight overreaction. Listen.
The president also instructed the intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of unidentified aerial objects. Indeed, President Biden conducted the first ever daily intelligence briefing session devoted to this phenomenon back in June 2021. He was briefed that this is not just an issue for the United States, but one for the rest of the world. And as I said, our friends and our partners are dealing with this as well. We worked on a bipartisan basis to stand up an office at the Pentagon to study this, in partnership with the intelligence community, academic institutions, and the private sector. These unidentified aerial phenomena have been reported for many years without explanation or deep examination by the government. President Biden has changed all that. We are finally trying to understand them better.
They're off to find the hero
In light of the Chinese balloon
the
program
day.
and this recent incursion into our airspace, the United States and Canada, through NORAD, have been more closely scrutinizing that airspace, including enhancing our radar capabilities, which, as the commander of NORTHCOM and NORAD, General Van Herk, said just last night, may at least partially explain the increase in the objects that have been detected. Slow-moving objects at high altitude with a small radar cross-section are difficult to detect on radar. Even objects the size of the Chinese spy balloon, which had a payload the size of roughly 3 school buses, were not picked up by previous administrations or other countries. We also know that a range of entities, including countries, companies, research, and academic organizations, operate objects at these altitudes for purposes that are not nefarious at all, including scientific research. That said, because we have not yet been able to definitively assess what these most recent objects are, we acted out of an abundance of caution to protect the security, our interest, and flight safety.
So he goes on to say they were over secure areas. They floated over. He does say that he doesn't think they had any steering capabilities, but they floated.
Yeah, and then the White House comes out and also admits that, hey, these things, it was Chinese, but it blew off course. There's nothing nefarious. They're literally talking out of both sides of their mouth. I also believe that, I think once they found, they want us to be scared. They want us to be distracted with this. And once it was, the idea of a balloon is not scary, kids holding a balloon, so they now need to change it. Mm-hmm. Now they need to really change this story, right?
But where they're not going anymore, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask a question really quick. So if a balloon is uncontrollable, how did they ever intend to bring it down then in the first place? How did they think that this wasn't going to happen? Didn't they have to have some kind of control to deflate it to bring it down?
Well,
or did they just plan on it?
No, that's a great question. That's one of the big questions that senators were asking as well. It's well, you said it was, we couldn't really figure out where it's gone. We can't find these things now. So in the past 48 hours, we've shot down another 3 of these. NORAD has shot down, they've never shot down anything in their literally history. And now they've literally shot down 3 of these, and we don't know where they are. Yet, you shoot a balloon down, it goes like this. It's not there's no flight path where it's continuing to fly.
Yeah.
So they're asking this, they're where the hell are these things? You see these giant school bus things in the sky that you're shooting down. We can't find them now?
Shouldn't you maybe go to people who do use these for weather purposes and say, how do you get them back? How does that work?
Well, now we're learning this afternoon that they're not even balloons. These things, now they're saying there's no amount of, and scientists are saying there's no amount of, you can't have a pressurized gas at that altitude. It just does not exist at the altitude where these things are being spotted at this point. So what the hell's happening here? So, but is it aliens? This is a question, of course, that the press corps has been asking, right?
Yes. So here's John Kirby's response to, is it aliens or extraterrestrial?
My understanding is that the top officials in the Pentagon, when asked explicitly if they were ruling out any kind of extraterrestrial presence, said they weren't ruling anything out. And yet at the beginning of today's briefing, albeit with her usual winning smile, Ms. Jean-Pierre seemed to rule out any extraterrestrial activity.
I don't think the American people need to worry about aliens with respect to these craft. Period. I don't think there's any more that needs to be said there.
On the Russian...
So they're not Russian, they're not Chinese, they're not aliens, then what the hell? Okay, so what the hell?
Well, let's watch Corinne Jean-Pierre answer that same question about aliens, and the room literally laughs at her, and she was like, well, you wanted me to say it, so I'm going to say it.
I know there have been questions and concerns about this, but there is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity. With these recent takedowns, again, there is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that, and it was important for us to say that from here because we've been hearing a lot about it.
So something is going on here. I mean, something really, really fishy is happening here. Yeah. Because, I mean, if you think about the total distraction from the Nord Stream pipeline explosion, which I heard Senator Mike Lee today talking about, saying this could rise to an impeachable offense for President Biden. An impeachable offense for President Biden, carrying out a war crime, an attack, a terrorist attack on we're not at war with Russia. So this would be an impeachable offense where you don't have congressional approval to carry out a clandestine terror attack on a foreign country, an impeachable offense. And so they don't want you talking about that.
Is a war crime only an impeachable offense, or is that not a criminal offense? Like, doesn't it go beyond impeachment at that point if it's a war crime?
Yeah, because impeachment really is just like kind of a slap on the hand, like you lose your job. Yeah. Right? Yeah, and then
not in this climate.
Yeah.
And you'd have to be a member of The Hague, which we are not. So we don't have to worry about the criminal court anyway.
So there's no war crimes tribunal because we're not a part of it because we would be in violation of all of it. True. So Senator Mike Lee, speaking today to Glenn Beck, I found this absolutely fascinating. He was in this intelligence briefing yesterday with Northcom and NORAD and these other members of the military industrial complex that were giving this briefing behind closed doors, classified briefing. And he said, we literally walked out of here. We don't know. They don't know. And they couldn't tell us anything. Watch this. It's crazy.
And we hear this morning that they are UAPs, which I guess could be balloons, but usually those are, something solid. These were the size of cars, and they weren't balloons. They were metal. Is that true?
Yeah, so first of all, we don't really know what they are. I don't know how they claim now to know what their nature is, whether they're commercial, military, or from some other origin, because they haven't found them. I suspect that they're theorizing
you see on what all this distraction?
That was what was so frustrating yesterday, is they held this classified briefing to tell us about what happened. And they showed up and basically said, we don't know what happened. We had all hoped and expected, based on public statements, that they had covered what was left of these objects and that they were studying them. They hadn't found them, at least as of yesterday when they briefed us. They hadn't found them. They still don't really know what they are.
So wait, did they show you video? I don't know what you can and can't say.
No.
Come on, we launched missiles. Yeah. We know we have the video from the cockpits. We know that.
Yeah. We repeatedly asked them about that. Can you show us anything by way of photographic documentation of a video footage, anything like that? They said, yeah, we've got some that really isn't useful because the objects are so small, so far away, that the resolution doesn't really do anything for us.
Then why would we shoot them down?
The picture. Down, not knowing what they were just based on their altitude. We just knew that they were there. But I still can't fathom why it made sense to scramble fighter jets, shoot missiles at them, bring them down, when we have no idea what they are.
Okay. Yeah. Good questions, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what they are. We can't find them. We asked, as senators, can you show us the cockpit footage of this? Mm-hmm. Like we saw on the USS Nimitz, right? David Faber and others. Show us the cockpit footage. Show us the footage of you shooting these down. We don't want to show it to you because it wouldn't really help you because it's too small. You wouldn't understand it.
Never mind. Forget it. You wouldn't understand anyways. You see how this is all a distraction because they did blow up Nord Stream. But hey, there's more. Dodge show off new EV charger with fake exhaust noise. With foamy roaring motor, sound be enough to appease muscle car enthusiasts. So they now got the electric EV charger from Dodge. You know, so fake motor sounds. So this is what it is. Artificial sounds. like everything else, though. Hey, this ain't going away, you know, and this is pretty much about Nord Stream. You know, they cannot quiet this away.
No
that's
matter
what they
how
try
much
to
they'd
do.
like it to vanish, the Nord Stream pipeline story just isn't going away. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh dropped the biggest story of the year last week. Hersh documented in detail bombshell claims by inside sources that the US blew up the Nord Stream pipelines as part of a covert operation. According to Hersh's sources, the explosives were planted in June 2022 by US Navy divers under the guise of the Voltops 22 NATO exercise and were detonated 3 months later with a remote signal sent by a sonar buoy. The attack was intended to make Germany more dependent on American energy and ramp up the military escalation in Ukraine. Now Hersh is promising to reveal further information about the plot. There may be more to learn about Joe Biden's decision to prevent the German government from having second thoughts about the lack of cheap gas this winter, Hersh wrote on Substack. Stay tuned, he said, we are only on first base. The journalist also pointed out how, similar to what they're doing now, the legacy media once ignored his expose on the My Lai massacre. Didn't mean it wasn't true. In a new interview with The Wire, Hersh says, quote, "It scares me if the president was willing to do this." And the people who did this mission believed that the president did realize what he was doing to the people of Germany, that he was punishing them for a war that wasn't going well, and in the long run this is going to be very detrimental not only to his reputation as the president, but politically too. It's going to be a stigma for America. Now China is also calling for a full and frank international investigation. It's imperative to conduct an objective, impartial and professional investigation into this incident with explosions and bring those responsible to justice, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin. Russia has also called a session of the UN Security Council next week, again demanding a massive international investigation. Washington still obviously strenuously denies the claims, while trying to frame the narrative that the story didn't even come from Hersh, but from within the bowels of the Kremlin.
What we have heard from Moscow, what we've heard from the Kremlin, is nothing but a lie. It is pure disinformation that...
yeah, Russia lies, and U.S. always tells the truth, right?
What transpired with Nord Stream 2.
Like there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq,
Snowden said
but the U.S. said there was.
Engineered to distract from the Nord Stream story hasn't had its intended effect. But then again, does the media really even need to distract from a story that they barely bothered to cover in the first place?
Exactly. They don't talk about that. Justin Trudeau could be the next to resign. Canadian Prime Minister on the chopping block. So this is coming out as well, because you already know that that cunt from New Zealand had retired, and then you already see what the new one is doing, that he's going to make sure that everybody's vaccinated in New Zealand, even going further than the old cunt did.
Following the unceremonious political exits of both Jacinda Ardern and Nicola Sturgeon, Justin Trudeau is now living on borrowed time. That's according to the same person who accurately predicted both Ardern and Sturgeon would step down before they did exactly that. The SNP leader's demise proves once again that get woke, go broke goes beyond just a mere cliche. Sturgeon put herself on the same side as militant trans activists by trying to pass a law that would allow anyone to be legally treated as the opposite gender, having only lived as that gender for as little as 6 months. This even extended to men identifying as women after they'd been charged with violent offences against women, with one case in particular proving disastrous for Sturgeon. After a convicted sex offender born a biological male was sent to an all-female prison, Sturgeon then gave a car crash interview in which she still insisted that such individuals should be considered women.
Are all trans women women? You haven't answered that question.
Well, that's not the point that we're dealing with here.
That's the question I'm asking.
Trans women are women, but in the prison context, there is no automatic right for a trans woman.
So there are contexts where a trans woman is not a woman.
No, there is.
Her approval rating plummeted and now she's out. But Sturgeon still asserted her resignation was, quote, not a reaction to short-term political pressures. Yeah, big doubt. Now the same journalist and politician who accurately called the downfall of both Ardern and Sturgeon says Justin Trudeau is next on the political chopping block. Writing in the Telegraph today, former MEP Patrick O'Flynn is calling time on Mr. Peoplekind.
We like to say peoplekind, not necessarily mankind.
First Jacinda Ardern, now Nicola Sturgeon, Justin Trudeau will be next. Another question now looms as a second long-serving darling of the progressive left falls by the wayside. Who's next? After Ardern and Sturgeon, the fickle finger of fate would seem now to be pointing at the leader of the selfie-taking summit rat pack himself, Canada's ultra-woke Justin Trudeau. Mark my words, he is on the wane. Our next victim of the woke curse is already on the conveyor belt to his demise, and you won't even need to stick pins in a doll to make it happen. So there you have it, that's big. Potentially 3 prominent leaders who aligned themselves with the forces of woke, all gone within a few months.
So anyhow, that's just a little bit from the poop chute. That's the only thing you can call it, right? Because that's just pretty much what it is, and just that Esau's being exposed in every way possible, so he cannot hide himself, right? You know, we're in that time. That's why Jeremiah 49 comes up a lot, you know. Jeremiah chapter 49. Behold, I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places, and he should not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. You know, and that's mostly dealing with Babylon and their lies, you know, as you can see there, that this just ain't going away, that they deliberately, you know, have poisoned the people in Ohio, and they deliberately have, indeed, they lie about a lot of things, but they're mostly lying about the Nord Stream pipeline. They blew it up, and they know it. They've been caught, and they're trying to distract everyone with these fake UFO stories, which they don't say is UFO, which is something else. All distractions, kind of like how you have a fake shooting every time, man. You know, some other motherfucker shoots someone, and boy, every news station's got to cover that, you know, because they got to go after the guns. Well, that's just it. Esau's being made bare, and he's been exposed. Leave thy fatherless children, and preserve them alive, and let thy widows trust in me. For I have sworn by myself, saith the Most High, that Basra shall become a desolation, a reproach, a waste, and a curse, and all the cities shall be perpetual waste. And that's when the Most High destroys this place. Well, this is the hopeful year that all prophecy come to pass. So, either way, though, we got a lot more, you know, to cover, you know, basically, because things are going to speed up a lot more. Shalom.